full moon in Libra that is happening on April 29th, which will be tomorrow. I'm recording this on April 28th. And this full moon in Libra is opposite the new moon that we had a couple weeks ago, which happened in Aries. We had the full moon in, or I'm sorry, we had the new moon in Aries a couple weeks ago. And as you remember, I told you, I explained at that time how important these cycles are of these lunation cycles when sun and moon come together. Sun and moon come together, it creates the beginning of the cycle, and then the halfway point is the full moon. And so each 30-day cycle is a time to live that lesson for that year, and then relative to the, from where that happens from your ascendant, it shows that major life lesson for that month. So we're all having the same experience based on where the planets are in general. This is our collective karma around the cycles. But for each ascendant, for example, there will be 12 different sort of manifestations of that. And then, of course, we all have a different birth chart as well. So in this Aries cycle, which started a couple weeks ago, we're all kind of collectively under the Aries lesson. And of course, that Aries lesson that we've all been working through has to do with individuality, self-expression, the courage to be yourself without the fear of asserting boundaries, without the fear of upsetting someone if you don't want to accommodate or compromise. This is the powerful Aries psychology, you would say. And that is opposite the Libra, which is about compromising and accommodating. So the halfway point in the Aries cycle is the Libra cycle, because each sign contains its opposite, and we don't realize the fullness of the Aries lesson, which is the fullness of our individuality, the fullness of our self-expression, until it gets mirrored and reflected back to us, which is the Libra principle. So it's easy to be your own individual self if there's nobody else around you and you're just by yourself, which is just sort of narcissistic. And maybe it's that way because you just can't get along with anybody, right? And when that happens, then our solitude and our individual strength and power is somewhat shallow because it's not being harmonized with the desires to connect with others. And that's part of our true nature, is to not just be an individual, but to share that passion we have with others and to see others enjoy it and to see it as something more universal. So again, when the sun and moon come together in Aries and start the cycle, it creates an extreme. There's an extreme. And of course, because that's where the sun is going, our main focus for the 30 days is on the sun cycle, where the sun and moon came together. So especially the first couple days of any new cycle is extreme with, okay, I'm really in that thing, right? And in a couple weeks, it'll be Taurus. Things will come together in Taurus and we'll be really in that Taurus energy, which is about stability, structure. And then the full moon comes and brings in the Scorpio, which says, okay, well, you can't just be stable and hang on to everything. You need to be dynamic as well. And that's what Scorpio brings. So in this Aries Libra dynamic, Libra is coming in the halfway point to get us out of our potential narcissism and the kind of militant individuality, the militant individualism of Aries. And so it helps to close the circle. And we then are testing our individuality in contrast to the temptation and the harmonic tension of another person or other people saying, okay, but where's the connection? And how much are you willing, how much can you hang on to that individuality when being tempted by the allure of enjoyment and desire, and literally even like sex and all of that stuff, the seduction of Libra energy. Libra is a very seductive energy. It's literally the sign of sex. By the way, Scorpio is not the sign of sex, it's Libra. Western astrology has this romance around Scorpio, sex, sex, sex. It's actually not sex, it's vulnerability. And because sex is one way that we are vulnerable, but the sex part, and then there's a house and sign correlation. But especially, you can look at it through the houses. The seventh house is where we're actually engaged with sex and with another person. The eighth house is the vulnerability that comes after we become intimate. But the intimacy and the deep sort of bonding comes through Libra, and then the vulnerability comes through Scorpio. But Scorpio is vulnerability anyway, and so is the eighth house. So there's obviously a correlation. But this full moon in Libra is happening on April 29th. And I'm going to run this a little bit. And it's happening in the nakshatra of Swati. So make sure it's still the 29th. Yeah. So here in the West, it'll happen like in California time, it'll happen about 5:30 in the afternoon. Purnima, the full moon in Libra and in Swati Nakshatra. So the nakshatra is Swati, which is ruled by the god Hanuman, actually the god Vayu. Let me do this here. So you can see my screen now. And this is the chart. And you can see that this full moon is happening with moon very close to Jupiter as well, with Jupiter retrograde. So this is going to be a 2 weeks of inspiration and purpose with the moon join retrograde Jupiter. But of course, it's that retrograde hope and purpose, that retrograde reflection on how much our relationships are inspiring to us, for example, because Jupiter's retrograde in Libra. And so we've been trying to find hope and purpose in our relationships, all relationships, that includes business partners and other things, because Jupiter has been there, but now he's been retrograde for a couple months. And, the full moon will be very close to retrograde Jupiter. So it brings that quality as well, where we may really be facing a lot of our illusions and disappointments about how much hope and inspiration we can even draw from our partners and our partnerships. People don't like to hear me say it sometimes, but our partnerships aren't really here to be our sort of religion or our great guru. Again, it doesn't mean we don't learn a lot through them, but our partners are not our gurus. and they're not our teachers. We need spiritual teachers, spiritual masters for that kind of thing. Our partners teach us something, but if we try to turn our partner into God, we try to turn our partner into the thing that's the meaning of our life, we're just going to create hell for them and us, because they're never going to be the meaning of our life. And again, we might try to do it for a while, but then it fails. And when it fails, then we project all of that onto them. You know, this sort of projection of, oh, you're God, oh, you're the devil. This extreme fantasy projections that because we're trying to find the meaning of life and God and whatnot in another person, and it doesn't work. And so there's a lot of that happening with Jupiter in Libra, which started last November or last October. I think it was middle October. And so moon is now, this full moon is there. And this is the first full moon since, we have one full moon join Jupiter each year, usually. So again, these are all very important things to know, right? We'll have one full moon join Saturn each year. We'll have one full moon join Mars each year, for example. Usually one. We might get two if there's a long Mars retrograde, but again, we get one full moon each. No, it wouldn't be two. We get one full moon each year in each sign, and it hits each planet as well, and also new moon. So this winds up happening all the time, these cycles. You should pay attention to them. And by the way, again, I do these things at my member site where, again, daily forecasts, where you can see every day what the forecast is based on the Rashi, the sign that the moon is in, the Nakshatra, the Tithi or the lunar phase, the Vara Lord, which is the Lord of the day, and the aspects to the moon and important shifts. And then I do these special lunation forecasts. I'm doing this general one, but then for my members, those people who join the astrology training lab, I do this for each of the 12 signs as well. Because this full moon is different if you're Virgo, which is happening in your second house opposite the 8th house sun, than it is for if you're Sagittarius, where this full moon is the 11th house opposite the 5th house Aries cycle. So again, these are the 30-day cycles, 14 to 15 to 30-day cycles that we're always going through. It's one of the best ways to learn astrology. You learn about everything that way because you're watching the daily sky, right? Instead of just looking at your chart or listening to the latest video about some abstract concept. Stay connected to the sky. You want to learn about yourself in relation to that, watch it every day. Watch and see what happens, right? It's the best teacher. That's why my best students are the ones that are involved and stay engaged and notice these things. So this will be important for the next 30 days, at least the next 14 days. Usually I say that the new moon has about a 30-day cycle to it. And the full moon is at least 2 weeks because it's taking away and integrating, but it's integrating the qualities of the sun sign. Okay. So again, the way to integrate the individuality is through the contrast and the temptation to slide on your principles and give in. Just give in to what people say. It's the easiest way to get along in life. Make everybody happy and just give in and just let go of your fiery principles and your desire to really make a big difference. Because as soon as you start doing that, as soon as you say, okay, this is what I'm about, and I'm ready to stand for this, I'm ready to die on this hill, I'm ready to die for this. As soon as you're that fired up, which is a lot of Aries energy, everybody around you will be going, oh, come on, just chill out, just relax, have fun, come on, don't get so fired up. Why are you so fired up? Why are you so? And you'll be like, yeah, you're right. And you slide on it. And then your whole life is that way and you never stood for anything. So it's hard to stay in that integrity. And it's also hard to be in that integrity and not be selfish or self-absorbed, short-tempered, impatient. So again, it's harmonizing these things so that we're not too identified and too attached to either one, right? And so each opposite sign breaks the attachment to the other one. It's a cycle to be fired up about what inspires you because it's an Aries cycle, but you can't take it too seriously because then it just becomes too much attachment to it. And instead, we need to harmonize that Libra quality. So that's what we're doing. So it's in Swati Nakshatra. Swati was ruled by the god Vayu. Vayu is the god of the wind. And this god of the wind roamed the earth. Vayu went everywhere. And he was quite lustful, had a lot of progeny, because he wanted to enjoy and spread the word, right? And so the quality of Swati Nakshatra is to scatter like the wind, right? And it's also reminiscent of like seeds scattering. And you can also see how, let's say, for example, like a promiscuous person scattering his seeds everywhere, right? That's the sort of detriment. But the benefit is that it's a good time for PR, marketing, getting the word out. And again, it's for like at least for a couple weeks as this Aries cycle is waning. This is a way to help us integrate. Again, Aries is that fierce individuality that can be sort of linear and one-pointed. Libra is very dispersed, and particularly Swati. And you should understand this schema with the nakshatras. And by the way, just to get this out of the way, because there's still the weird stuff out there, this is Vedic astrology, which uses the sidereal zodiac, always, first and last and always. Little Sisters of Mercy reference, first and last and always, right? You know Sisters of Mercy? Probably not. First and last and always, sidereal zodiac. I say this because Swati is the only nakshatra that's completely in Libra. So the nakshatras that are related to Rahu, which is Ardra in Gemini, Swati in Libra, and Shatabishak in Aquarius, are the nakshatras that are purely in the water in the air signs. The other two nakshatras that are in the air signs are in other signs as well. They're partially in other signs. By the way, for Earth, it's the ones related to the moon, which is Rohini, Hasta, and Shravana. And the other ones, the water and the fire, have two nakshatras that are fully contained. So again, every Vedic astrology text drew a parallel and a connection. Nakshatras and Rashis occupy the same space, even down to the padas, down to the Navamsha chart. No question, never has been, just because some people are confused. Just, you should just not pay any attention to it. So Swati is, and I say this because Swati is the nakshatra, the airy nakshatra, one of the three big airy nakshatras. Means they're purely in the air signs. Ardra, Swati, and Shatabishak. Again, because the other ones are, you know, Chitra is half in Virgo, and Vishaka has the last pada in Scorpio. So Swati is the largest one, and it's the power to scatter, just like air is scattered and moving. You can see that's also the way Ardra is, to blow things up, and Shatabishak to make things, you know, just dispersed everywhere, related to Varuna and the clouds and the atmosphere. So this scattering and dispersing is literally like anathema to the I'm an individual in Aries. I'm the one-pointed individual in Aries, right? The nakshatra in Libra that's fully in Libra, Swati, is to scatter in a good way and to disperse. And also to be of service, because the son of Vayu was Hanuman. So this is why often it's considered, a very appropriate deity for worship in Libra, but especially in Swati, is Hanuman, because he was the son of Vayu. So he was an incarnation of Vayu, the wind, and its relationship to prana. Because see, wind and Vayu, the master essence is prana, which is breath, vitality, power. What we usually do is we disperse it and we scatter it. We scatter our power all over the place and we lose our prana rather than retain the prana, rather than hold the power and the vitality. So his son, Hanuman, is an incarnation, is an emanation of prana being concentrated, right? Because when the prana stays concentrated, we become a superhero. We become superheroic. This is why Hanuman was the great hero of the Ramayana, the Superman, the superhuman. He could fly, again, just like the air. And again, just to say, when you're looking at tropical zodiac that winds up in Scorpio, it makes no sense. Even the mythology, it just makes no sense. The whole thing makes no sense. I don't want to get off on that, but just to give you an indication, it's an air. So again, when you see this connection to Vayu, which is air, and it's Libra, which is air, the great hero Hanuman, which is flying, and by the way, and also the retention of the prana through things like brahmacharya and the yogic practices of retaining the prana, which gives the spiritual power. And Libra is one of the most stimulated signs. It's literally the sign of sexuality, where we lose our prana, where we lose the power. We lose our prana, we lose our power. Or we can balance the prana, balance the nadis through yoga and other pranayama, right? So again, very powerful nakshatra when you start looking at the zodiac holistically and you start making simple connections between the zodiac and nakshatras and whatnot. You also see how the other zodiac just makes no sense. You wonder how anyone could say it. And so again, this is the power of overcoming the attachment even to relationship and the stimulation. And it's an issue that is with Venus, because Venus is where we lose our prana to sexuality and stimulation and food and indulgence. And Mars is actually opposite, where we want to be strong and hold on to the power. Again, the yogi is very much related to Mars, and the temptation of marriage and enjoyment and stimulation is Venus pulling him out. So again, the real culmination of the Aries energy is the yogi, is the one who doesn't need the relationship. And again, often living a worldly life, we live a life as a householder or being related to other people. We have relationships and whatnot. But the highest functioning of this energy, of this Aries energy, is literally like the monk, the yogi, who has mastered the sex and the temptation of Libra, right? But when that happens, there's no struggle. And again, it's the same correlation that I said at the beginning, right? Because this is the same integration of our individuality with the temptations and the stimulation and the harmonizing with others. It's also an internal harmonizing where we reconcile our own desires. This is the real dynamic of Aries and Libra. We play it out externally with me being the powerful one or you asking me to compromise. That's the mundane level. But on the spiritual level, the highest level, it's the rebirth of Aries. Rebirth in the sense of beyond the world of stimulation and of compromising and being pulled into the world because of the promise of pleasure and enjoyment and stimulation and comfort and all those Venus things. So these are deep principles, of course. I could go on about these things for all day because they're really deep. So share the screen again a little bit and then call it a day. But of course, we have the exalted sun here, which is giving a lot of power to be the strong individual. We also have a powerful Venus in Taurus right now, which is giving a lot of connection, joy, beauty, to bring about structure and a solid form and a community around us, which is very powerful Venus stuff. I already talked about Jupiter retrograde in Libra. We have this Mars-Saturn conjunction. Mars is about to go into Capricorn, where he's going to be exalted for 6 months. But you see, he's now separated. Saturn is retrograde. I'm going to be doing some upcoming videos on these things, but there's some big shifts happening, I think, in the more positive realm, especially with Mars, where he'll be exalted for the next 6 months, where it's a time to be more strategic about the expression of our energy and our vitality. This also bodes well for the rest of this Aries cycle. So we should see some positive movement on this issue that I'm talking about with individuality and compromise and working through our delusions and being responsible for ourselves first, knowing where we are not willing to compromise. Then anytime we compromise, it's because we want to, not because we feel like we have to in order to please people, and then we wind up resenting them because we don't know ourselves well enough to hold a line of integrity, and all these conundrums we get into with other people where we wind up blaming them for stuff that's really our own stuff because we don't know ourselves well enough, all the craziness. So a lot of benefit here in the next few days, and then for 6 months later when Mars goes into Capricorn, and we'll still be benefiting from Venus and Taurus for a couple weeks after that. So having these two planets both strong will bode well for the rest of this Aries cycle. And again, if I forgot to mention, if you want to join the site that I told you about, it's astrologytraininglab.com. I'll put it in the description under the video, astrologytraininglab.com. Only 50 cents. You can get 2 weeks of forecast, and you can find out this forecast for your sign. And then if you cancel within 2 weeks, then that's it. But then if you want to stay a member, it's $39.95 per month, and you can cancel at any time if you want to stay a member, and if you want to keep getting the daily forecast. And there's also a bunch of free classes that you get. So the last thing is the Mercury will be leaving his sign of debilitation within a couple weeks, so by first week of May. So, that'll be like May 9th or 10th. So Mercury's still in its debilitated sign. So we're still kind of clunking around in our ideas, not so clear, but that's another video. So anyway, I hope you've had a good couple weeks working through your big bad self and your individuality. Now you're feeling that pull to others. You're feeling the pull to compromise and to look at yourself and go, yeah, you know what? Maybe I am kind of selfish. Maybe I am kind of all about me. Maybe this is where I could have compromised better before. I could stop projecting so much onto others, which is the moon Jupiter that I talked about, this moon Jupiter. And, you know, it's a good time to retain our prana, not scatter like the wind, but put out the good word, put out what's meaningful to us, and really communicate effectively, but not lose our prana. Be like Hanuman, who was the great servant of Lord Rama, to be of service to others, to be of service to our higher purpose. Because again, this is in contrast to the Aries principle. So we could still retain our power of individuality, but show up in service to others, offer it in service to something bigger. Because and therefore, and in fact, the truth is that our true identity is bigger than our personality and what we're going to accomplish. And being of service to that, again, that's also the halfway point in the cycle, where our ego and individuality is here, and then the halfway point is to be in service of the higher self. And so what happens is after the full moon, then we start to integrate those qualities into our individuality. So that's what you can expect the next couple of weeks. And those qualities of Hanuman, Vayu, scattering and dispersing skillfully, which means also scattering and dissolving your ego and personality, and therefore retaining the prana and retaining the power that you have. So I hope this was helpful.